Well, hello, everyone. Happy Wednesday. Thank you for coming to our SDCOE hosted webinar. Thank you, Joel, for helping organize this. This is our labor market information. It's practical applications for CTE pathways and career guidance. And I know that's a mouthful, so we kind of summed it up at the bottom, just talking to students about LMI. I am one of your presenters today. I am Jennifer Prado, and I am going to introduce our co-presenters today. We have Nicole Morsch. I'm sorry, let me pull this up real quick. Nicole, did you want to go to the next slide for me? Sorry, I have to say next slide. We have Nicole Morsch. She is our K-12 pathway coordinator that serves the Mira Costa Community College District, and Christine Jensen, who serves our Southwestern Community College District, and then myself, and I serve Palomar. And I know our roles are somewhat new to the region, so we always want to kind of give a brief recap. And we do a lot. I always say we do a lot. We're the connectors for everybody, but really our roles serve as to act as a point of contact for high school and community college, help to expand and enhance already existing or new career pathways, provide technical assistance or in the real world kind of consulting services in the implementation of all things CTE. But one of our areas that we try to focus on, and we do a lot of work around labor market. We sit in with the Center of Excellence's labor market professional development with other TAPs and pathway coordinators across the state. We focus on labor market and high demand industry sectors, and how best we could use this information and to guide our decisions on our CTE pathways in the county. So with that said, I am going to turn it over to Nicole.
All right, thank you, Jen. So good afternoon, everybody. We're going to get you started with a couple examples here. As Jen said, my name is Nicole Morsch, and I am a K-12 pathway coordinator for the San Diego Imperial region as well. The Mira, I have LEAs that feed into Mira Costa. So have you ever had a student tell you they plan to play professional football or become a YouTube star? This is something we come across often when we're teaching career education or career readiness, and we've got the kids who've got it all planned out, right? So they're already figured out that this is what they're going to do. We thought it'd be fun to introduce yourself in the chat, and you can share your early career aspirations. Mine would have been to be a veterinarian, which did not come to pass, but that was my early career aspiration. Go ahead and take a minute to put your name in the chat and share with us some of the things that you maybe aspired to when you were a child. Social media was probably not a thing then.
I also placed today's presentation, a link to today's presentation in the chat for anybody who wanted to access that. You'll be able to find the presentation with all our links and even our presentation notes today.
Great. All right, we've got a baseball player. Ooh, a horse trainer. I like that one. Gymnast, Disney animator, fantastic. You guys were more creative than I was. Pediatric cardiologist, of course. So you were close there, Jewel. High school teacher, artist, interior design. Ooh, photographer. Yeah, I thought about that too. Working for NASA, very cool. Olympic athlete, that would have been good. We have these kids who have these career aspirations, and we want to promote that and support that, but also we want to be realistic about giving students the information to advise them and put them in a place where they can use information to have a successful career. We do have people out there. I use this as an example over here. We've got Ryan Kaji. He's 9, if that makes you feel any better about your choices as an adult career. He made $29.5 million last year as a YouTube social media influencer. That's right, folks. He opened toys online for a living, and he got paid $29.5 million. So I have 10-year-old twins. They, of course, aspire to the same thing. But when I have conversations with them about labor market information, or just jobs in general, this is one of the things that we're going to cover today. So for students who want to be famous and millionaires by 21, how do you advise them? What were successes or struggles you had in the conversation? Did you use labor market information in your discussion? This workshop will help address these difficult conversations. So the first thing we're going to kind of touch on here has to do with career pathways, right? So when we're talking about career planning, there's kind of 4 stages that you go through. There's the knowing who you are, right? The exploring where you want to go, the planning how you're going to go there, and then recalculating or recalibrating as needed. So when we talk about academic and career planning, which we offer pretty much in every district, it gives us a process to help any student pursue any career. After all, just because a career isn't hugely in demand in the future doesn't mean that it's not right fit for any student, right? We're going to have professional athletes, we're going to have YouTubers, and for students to develop high school aspirations, we still want to reflect ways that we can teach them those broader employability skills. So the purpose of today's training is to address that, kind of looking at 3 different objectives. The first one being learn about what labor market information is and why it's important, breaking down the different components of labor market information, and then exploring LMI resources with students and learning where to find them. So I'm going to turn over this next piece. Am I doing these first parts? I think I am. All right. So I don't need to turn it over. I'm going to talk to you about just kind of the what is, give you kind of some background. And for those of you that do career readiness, you have familiarity with some of these terms, but quite frequently, some of these terms get kind of interchanged, and we wanted to be really intentional about talking some of these terms. So labor market information, what is it? Well, it's data and analysis related to employment and the workforce. Okay, so it's data about labor supply and demand. It's the expected number of job openings, earnings, how much a given job pays, knowledge, skills, and interests applied, related jobs and training, and demographics also comes into play. And when we want to talk about where that information comes from, there's actually quite a few sources. We get statistics from the US Bureau of Labor Statistics. We get information from Employment Development Department about who's employed and where. We look at surveys of employers and workers and job postings, as well as data inputted by schools. So for those of you that are familiar with like CalPADS data and data that your schools collect, that is also factored in when we talk about in-demand jobs and labor market information. So then, of course, when you're having those conversations, you want to talk to students about, okay, well, why is this important, right? So in talking to students, let's say you have these questions from a high school student. What jobs are hiring now? How much will I earn? Well, LMI can connect students with in-demand jobs that will support the lifestyles they hoped for. And then they might say, well, where geographically, where I'd be able to find this job? And labor market information can show job availability by region. So that's another helpful thing that guides students towards a particular region. Maybe they want to live in the community that they grew up in. Will there be opportunities in the field I'm considering after I complete the required training and education? LMI can predict emerging sectors, so students make informed decisions about the future. Students are better equipped to find employment and avoid college debt if they use LMI to find a job. And we know that that is a big thing right now in today's society is, students coming out of university or even community college with some college debt. So that's something we want to avoid. All right, let's talk about some big terms here. One of them being projected annual job openings and the other one being annual median wages. All right, projected job openings are how many jobs will be available in the future. And also we want to look at the annual median wage, which is the wages in the middle, okay? And this is an important distinction between average mean or average wages, because the middle means that half of the people are above this level and half of the people are below. And the median wage is a better than average annual wage, because when you talk about people like this scenario we gave with this kid, right, Ryan Podgy, factoring his income last year into, say, that particular job sector is going to very much skew your average earnings in a way that's not going to be reflective of what's really going on out there. So typically when you read labor market reports, they use the median wage or like the middle. One of the other things we're going to talk about is how you look at those two things. So annual job openings and median wages. And then that helps determine whether there's going to be a large amount of jobs in that field, and then whether they're going to pay a life-sustaining wage. So that's kind of the key points there. All right, couple other terms that you're going to see thrown around in these labor market briefs are priority jobs, or they're sometimes referred to as hot jobs. Those are high-paying jobs. They're the ones that have the most projected openings. According to San Diego Workforce Partnership, priority jobs pay at least 90% of workers $16 an hour or more, and they provide at least 63 openings a year and are projected to grow by at least 6.5% annually. So when they define a priority job in San Diego County, that's how it's defined. And last year there were 72 openings a year in the priority, I guess, hot jobs market. I think it was 72, yeah. So when you look at priority sectors, this is one where you have to make a distinction, all right? A lot of times you'll read labor market briefs and they'll talk about priority sectors, and then they'll also use the terms emerging sectors, which they sometimes use interchangeably, but they're not actually the same thing, okay? So priority sector means industry sectors with high and growing numbers of jobs, but the ones that are priority now. Emerging sectors are industry sectors with projected jobs, newly growing jobs. Emerging sectors, for example, in our county, San Diego County, are things like IT related fields, artificial intelligence, virtual reality, biotech, and the cannabis industry. Those are all emerging sectors. Other emerging sectors are things like brewing, gig work like Uber, Instacart drivers. But then when you consider things like the pandemic, the brewery or microbrewery industry in San Diego was hit pretty hard by that because we all closed the bars and the restaurants, right? So even though it's designated as an emerging sector, there's still things that can affect that sector's growth. Whereas with priority sectors, they're currently the ones that are in the most high demand right now. So hopefully that kind of clarifies the difference between those two terms. Now, I want to point out before I go to the next slide, this icon up here in the top. If you see a link to any of the slides, that means that there's important resources linked here or in the speaker notes. So when you have access to the slide deck, which they'll pop again in the chat, if somebody would just pop the link in the chat, you'll be able to reflect back on these slides later and the resources are linked. All right. Please feel free to ask questions as I go along in the chat, because I know my other two counterparts here can answer questions as they come up. Let's carry on and talk about the county. All right, let's look at the real estate market, shall we? Always a fun one. So here we have this chart, and this is showing San Diego real estate. So the green bars are the home sales by year. And then the blue line is the median home price, which you can see here's the drop that happened in 2008. And then it's been steadily increasing since then. As of 2018, you might have noticed those last couple years there, it did fall away. It dropped down in terms of home sales, but that was because there was low inventory. And because of that, we didn't have this matchup of supply and demand. Home prices continued to rise. So as of 2018, the middle or median home price in San Diego County was $637,000. Incredible, isn't it? More recent data, as of January, this past January 2021, they're now at 730,000. So what's the takeaway there? The takeaway is it's expensive to live in San Diego. The cost of living is extremely high. And understanding labor market information is important if you want to live here in the community where you currently reside, go to school, etc. Now, a lot of the stuff we're going to speak to today focuses on what they call middle skill jobs. Middle skill jobs are defined as needing more than a high school diploma, but needing less than a 4-year degree. So that's what they define a middle skill job. And when we think of middle skill jobs, We think of them as being maybe not as high in demand. When you hear people talking about jobs available in San Diego County, you might hear them say, we need engineers, or we need web developers, or we need, other jobs that call for a bachelor's degree or higher. But when you look at this percentage breakdown here, this is the 1.5 million jobs in San Diego County. You'll notice that middle skill jobs are actually 38% of the overall total, whereas this above middle skill, those engineers I was speaking of, they're a smaller percentage. So there is a high need for people within this middle skill job section because they make up 38% of the total employment. And there is definitely a need for us to be training and preparing students to be going into that group of employees. All right, so what do you think the median hourly wage is in San Diego or Imperial County? Try and formulate a guess before I unveil here.
Nicole, can you repeat the question again?
What do you think is the median hourly wage in San Diego County? What are you getting paid per hour? Pretty darn close, Esteban. Pretty darn close. All right, well, let's see. So let's find out. We have San Diego versus Imperial. Here we have middle skill jobs as compared to all jobs. And then we have what were considered our top middle skill jobs. So our high paying are the ones that we're focusing on. We're priority sectors, high paying middle skill jobs. $26.70 an hour is what is the median hourly rate in San Diego County. So that's pretty good considering. Higher than you might expect. In Imperial, where it's inland, it's a little bit less. It's $23.96, but it still gives you an income of $49,800 annually, which is considered a livable wage. And I know Christine's going to get kind of more into that when she actually breaks down a labor market report with you. But that's pretty good income when we consider that we're talking about people that have in between a high school diploma and a bachelor's degree or something of that nature. Now, you probably can think in your head, okay, there's a concentration of certain industry sectors here in San Diego County, but these are officially the ones that are designated as the greatest need for those middle skilled workers, okay, or priority sectors is what we call them. So we've got advanced manufacturing, which is a big one, advanced transportation and logistics, agriculture, water, and environmental technologies. And there's actually a very big movement right now in San Diego of what they call blue tech, which is like environmental water technologies mixed with technology, especially with some of our military contracts. We have a business and entrepreneurship sector that's high priority, energy, construction and utilities, health, what we call ICT, information technology, communication technologies, and then life sciences and biotech. Over here, you'll notice there's 9. They also include global trade, which isn't listed on this one because they only list the top 8, but that's also considered a priority sector. All right, so keep that in mind in terms of where the concentrations of jobs are in this community. And what we're going to do now is I'm going to transfer you over to Christine. She's another one of our K-12 pathway coordinators, and she's going to kind of walk you through what it looks like to break down looking at a labor market brief.
Thanks, Nicole. Hi, everybody. My name's Christine, and as Nicole said, I'm going to be breaking down a labor market report. So this next part is intended to better educate both teachers and counselors on how to read labor market briefs specifically. The better you can understand the data, the better you're able to obviously work with students and parents. So if you can go to the next slide, Nicole. First, I want to just kind of get a poll on how many of you have been to myworkforceconnection.org before. So if you can go to the bottom of your Zoom, and you'll notice that there is a reactions button, and raise your hand if you have been to this website before. So it looks like a good number of you have.
Yeah, I would say it's about half. Maybe a
Good.
little less. Well, maybe a third.
All right. Okay, so the reason why we're using myworkforceconnection.org is that it houses what's called the Centers of Excellence for Labor Market Research. This is an important source of data because it focuses on middle skill jobs, as Nicole had mentioned earlier, as well as the San Diego and Imperial County region. Our local colleges make requests to the COE, the Centers of Excellence, to analyze data and create reports that cover the sectors and industry needs specific to our area. This in turn helps inform our regional community colleges and the courses and programs that they either develop or have developed in the past. There are other sources of LMI on other sites, and Jen will go over those later, but we want to make sure that we stick with one source for the purpose of this presentation, because different sources use different terms and different criteria, which can be slightly confusing. So we're just going to stick with the Centers of Excellence and myworkforceconnection.org. So if you go to the next slide, we're going to walk you through it. One too many. Can you go back,
sorry.
Nicole? That's okay.
Okay, and then this one.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, you're right. So, excuse me. So we're going to reflect on a scenario. This is how we're going to do it. We're going to look at student A. He's excelling in his hands-on CTE course, engineering design, but unfortunately he's struggling with his general education classes. His parents are pushing a 4-year university experience, even though he's not super interested other than to, hang out with friends and maybe be away from home. He would prefer to work with machines and either, make robots or play with robots. So let's research some regional LMI to help both student A and his parents see the value in taking career education courses at the community college. First thing you want to do, if we can have everybody kind of walk through this activity together, is open a new browser and go to myworkforceconnection.org. And so it's www.myworkforceconnection.org. Click on the labor market information, then labor market briefs. Scroll down the page to advanced manufacturing. A drop down will appear, and then you scroll down until you see engineering technician occupations. If you click on that, it'll open up a brief in a new browser.
And for those who maybe want to kind of shortcut, I placed the actual report that Christine just referenced for engineering technician occupations in the chat, if you wanted to kind of quickly grab that.
Okay, so we're going to give you about 30 seconds. I know it's not long, to take a quick look at the report. We'll go through it in much more detail as we continue through the exercise, so don't worry about reading a lot, just kind of skim through it. Should have Jeopardy music, huh? Okay, so a few slides back, Nicole had mentioned how high the median home prices in San Diego County are. She also mentioned that the median salary in San Diego is $26.70 an hour. Let's look at a new term. This is also important to LMI. People who study economic and workforce development often use the term living wage. This refers to the minimum income level that a person or family needs in order to afford shelter, food, and other basic necessities. They use this term to help determine whether people can earn enough income for a satisfactory standard of living. So hopefully not scraping by, but possibly living paycheck to paycheck. Does anybody know what the living wage in San Diego is? And you can either call it out or put it in the chat. And we have a picture of the country and the living wage around the country. And you can see that California, it's $57,000. So good guess, Esteban. That's pretty much it. Thank you. So it's $15.99. So let's see, now that we know what that living wage is, whether or not being an engineering tech will provide enough money for a student to live. So looking at the report on page 5, you will find the graph that is pictured on this slide. The dotted green line is the living wage in San Diego. If you look at the 10th percentile, $21.77, that is what entry-level technicians earn in San Diego. When you look at the graph and look at 25%, the 25 percentile, that dollar amount, that $27.57, is how much people earn with a community college degree. So even if you have just barely a high school diploma, you can earn above a living wage. So that's good. All right. Now that we know that students can make more than a living wage, let's look at demand. Nicole, thank you. So demand is about open positions, which ultimately affects the potential to get hired, right? If there's a gap in the number of trained individuals, such as supply, between the supply and the need, this increases the student's ability to get employed. It helps them retain their position, earn salary raises, and become a valuable employee. So all things that are going to help them get employed and stay employed. When you look at this diagram, let's take example, like I personally own a company, woohoo, and I need 6 engineering technicians. I already have 4 on my payroll, but the job openings, the ones that I'm going to put out to see if I can get some additional people, my demand is 2 people. So teachers and counselors, students, parents looking at LMI need to be able to make the distinction between how many people are actually employed in a given field and the demand for jobs. LMI helps us make sure that when we're training the future workforce, that there's actually a demand available, that there's actually room to hire people, and that's important to understand. So let's go back to the report. For engineering technicians, our region is training enough students to meet the needs of industry? So if you look on page 7, you'll see this chart, Exhibit 6. Can anyone tell whether or not we're training enough people? Anyone want to throw an answer in the chat?
Christine, can you repeat the question one more time?
Sure. If you look at this chart, is our region training enough students to meet the needs of industry?
Yeah, I'm getting some.
So absolutely, the answer is no, we are not. So there is a need in San Diego County for 259 engineering technicians on an annual basis. Unfortunately, our colleges are only training about 17 a year. That's not even supplying 7%, which leaves a huge gap of about 242 open positions. So it's important to note that this is a basic analysis of supply and demand. The data doesn't include workers who are currently in the field, who could fill the position, or workers who are not captured by publicly available data. So just, this is an example of data and how to read it, but understand that all data, may have a little bit of gap in it. So does anyone have a takeaway to the fact that there are not enough, we're not supplying enough students? Like, do you have a recommendation that you might provide to either high school teachers, high school administrators, or college administrators about what we can do to fill that gap? good. Students need more exposure to jobs. Yeah. Anyone else want to give? Educate high school teachers about the career. Can't shoot for what you don't know. Yep. So, so I think one of the things is we can create more community college programs to offer training to students, but it also may create opportunities for high school faculty to say, you know what, students are getting hired right out of high school because there's a need. And so if I do the right things in my courses, I can potentially get my students hired right out of my program. So yeah, that's a great suggestion. Develop some type of internship between community college and high schoolers. All right. So another important component to understanding whether an engineering technician is a good job for students in this area is looking at how many students find a job closely related to that field of study. So you can find this information on page 8 of your report, if any of you are still following along. Unfortunately, because we are only supplying 7% of engineering techs, there isn't really sufficient data to know whether students are getting a job in their field in San Diego, Imperial County. However, if you look at statewide data, which is what Nicole is circling now, you can see that over 50% of students do find a related job. Now, if you compare that 52% with other fields, it is lower than many, but it's important to realize that this is self-reported data from the student. So if a student doesn't feel that their current employment doesn't relate, it doesn't mean that they aren't using transferable skills. So, you know, things that they've learned about, you know, reading blueprints or doing computer programming to program, you know, PLCs, or doing some soldering, all of those kinds of skills may be used in other kinds of jobs. All right, so finally, let's see what kind of education is expected by industry to hire these engineering techs. So on page 9, you can see that nationally, they request that industry requests that students come out with at least an associate's degree. However, regionally, 63% of employers think that high school or vocational training is enough. And this is probably an indication that the supply gap we were discussing earlier, that not enough colleges are offering education or engineering technician programs are available. And so what are they doing? They're going to the next best thing, which may be high school or vocationally trained students. Esteban, so if you can go back, Nicole, to the previous slide, I think it is, the one more, sorry, one more. So we actually had this conversation with the Centers of Excellence about the fact that they put it oversupply in red.
They said the same thing, yep.
Yeah, so I put a little note that the number would be red if it was an oversupply. I think they may have changed that in future reports, but all of the reports that currently exist, right now it's just indicating that if it's in black, then it's a gap. If it's in red, it's an oversupply.
Sorry to interrupt. Yeah, I think when we had PD with counselors and admin, they get confused because they say the oversupply and they're like, wait a minute, isn't it more demand? And it's like, I have to explain to them, yeah, that's kind of, so I was just curious if that was going to be changing for moving forward.
Yeah, I think, well, we shared our concerns, so hopefully they'll be able to change that from here on forward. Okay. So really, thank you very much for that question. So we've looked at a lot of LMI and we've done a very quick analysis of it all. So let's go back to thinking about that student A and his parents. Based on the data, do you think engineering technicians are good jobs for your students? Why or why not? And I just want to make a mention here that there isn't a right or wrong answer for this. The report shared positive things about being an engineering tech, negative things, and it also had gaps. So if anybody wants to make a case for whether they would support the student A being an engineering tech or not being an engineering tech. I'd love to hear it.
Well, there's definitely a need with that.
There is a need.
That few of people being produced by the community colleges or the programs.
Yeah, I would agree. And then the labor market and the living wage obviously supports for our region. I think we also got to get back to if this is something the student wants to do. And that's where the job shadow exposure kind of comes in and things like that, internships.
Yep.
Absolutely. So Kenya mentioned good salary and there's a demand. So yes, absolutely. So thank you for those of you who shared. And then we'll go back to you, Nicole.
All right, great. All right, so we're giving you just the glazed over summary version of all of this today because you can do a deep dive into this stuff and spend much more time on it. But hopefully these are ideas and slides that you can reflect back on and use with your students. We're going to talk a little bit about those resources that you can use and where you can find them. There's a lot of things that you can look up online and a lot of regional and local data. But we're going to kind of demystify some of that. And then Jen, one of our other presenters, is going to get into it in more detail. I would say in terms of kind of three main places that you can look for specifically labor market information. They've got it, of course, on other sites like school sites and like the County Office of Ed site, but these ones specifically focus on labor market information would be these three. And again, there's this link icon to indicate that this is a linked, all of these are links that you can go back to and refer back to. So one of them is careered.org. And that was the one we were referencing with a couple of our statistics. And it's specific to San Diego Imperial Community Colleges. So their motto is learn more, earn more. And they really do a lot of work with focusing on trying to find and prepare students for those middle skilled worker positions. They have this really great resource called a program finder tool, which I'm not going to go into today, but I encourage you to go back and click on it, where you can essentially look up any program within any of the community college systems within any sector, and it'll break it down by what you can make and the availability of those jobs, et cetera. So it's a great resource. The second one I would recommend would be myworkforceconnection.org, not to be confused with workforce.org, which is very similar. This one has these icons that you'll see. This is put on by the regional consortium, again, regional local information. And the nice kind of features that they have here, they've got labor market briefs, they've got special reports, which Jen's going to talk about, which I find really helpful. And then they have a great career education guide that is just recently updated, their 2020, and it's kind of like a one-stop shop for a lot of information that students find useful. In fact, we encourage people to actually post this maybe on a website. The last one would be our workforce.org, which also talks about priority sectors. They have a help find me a job filter system where you can click in specific sectors and it filters it down to specific jobs. They also have great reports and posters, as well as essential skills posters that are great for like posting in your classroom, or if you have a career center as a counselor. Those are both great resources that I encourage you to take a closer look at. And on that note, Jennifer is going to talk to you about some of those resources in more detail.
Thanks, Nicole. Yeah, I really think, I mean, I know that some of you are familiar with these LMI resources. And again, we wanted to take a little deeper dive in and talk about them specifically, but really just trying to change your mindset around these resources and having them become more student used, I think is our intention for today. And one of the resources I reference all the time and have the LEAs that I work with use when talking to students is the San Diego Priority Sector Briefs. These are student friendly. They cover our priority sectors. They show things like the annual average earnings, growth, and projected growth in that sector. They talk about local employers that we see in our region, and you'll see things on there such as Northrop Grumman and Raytheon, different companies that the students are probably familiar with. They also talk about soft skills that are also attached and important to have in this priority sector. And one of the things that it highlights is the career and salary info. And you can see on the right side, the white section really showcases how much a student can get paid for a job with just a high school diploma and maybe a certificate. And the gray area will highlight areas such as a student who has went through an AA program or a higher degree program, still in that same priority sector. So really great tool. Please use with your students. You'll find it on myworkforceconnection.org as well. Our next resource we wanted to highlight is our career education guide. We know that you probably have seen this as well, but this is a very powerful tool when you're talking about careers across different industry sectors. Not only does it show annual earnings and projected growth, but this also really is in line with the RIASEC to match industry sectors. So if you're talking to your students about career interest inventories, whether it's in middle school or high school, they can use these and search careers based on their areas of strength. Again, you'll see the local breakdown of employers, how much they pay based on the level of education, high school diploma, certificates, AA degrees, or bachelor's, or even further education. Next slide, Nicole. Our next slide, excuse me, is our resilient job. And this is one you might not be as familiar with, but this was a report that was released about resilient jobs, jobs that are recession proof, and for jobs that we still see thriving in our COVID-19 pandemic. You will also find this on My Workforce Connection. In this chart on the right side shows a list of the top 10 COVID resistant jobs from March to June. And this means that these jobs, such as an accounting technician or a computer system analyst, maintain their hiring and earnings potential, while other jobs were heavily impacted by the pandemic, like we talked about the brewery type industry. So this is a great tool if you're talking about kind of COVID related career conversations with students. Please use this as a resource. I'll have you go to the next one, Nicole. Thank you. Our next one is our 21st Century Employability Skills Report. This shows labor market analysis of employability skills, or what we know as soft skills or essential skills. Any job, no matter what type of career your students want to pursue, it's a good report to use as a foundational conversation for LMI. For example, you'll see things such as critical thinking or good listening or essential skills that all employers want to see their hiring candidates have. Great resource for teaching skills and any transferable skills to career. Thank you, Nicole. So I wanted to kind of go back to in the beginning when kind of putting it all together. Knowing more about the purpose of labor market, I want you to think back to the student in the beginning who we told you wanted to be a football player or the YouTuber. I'm going to kind of challenge you guys to ask yourself, how might you support them and provide them how would you support them or provide them different, knowing what you know now based off the LMI reports that we just discussed. I'm going to ask you guys to take a minute and kind of put your response or formulate a response in the chat. And I'll give you about 30 seconds. No pressure. Oh, did we give them a full minute?
Yeah.
Sorry. Full minute you got to formulate a response. So how might the support you provide them be different, knowing what you know now, and what do you still find challenging using these reports?
All right, Jen, do you want me to read some of the things in the chat, or can you see it?
Yeah, we have some time. Why don't you go ahead and pick a few, please?
We have looking at skills, interests, and abilities, compare that to what's needed in that specific job, which is great. Thank you. Have them look at career span of a professional athlete. Calculate what their earning would be minus taxes and versus long-term career and earning power. Plus, they would likely have to have academics to get into college, since it's the first step to becoming a professional athlete. That's a very good point.
Fair point.
Need to have Esteban come talk to my students. We need work-based learning guest speakers from industry, job shadowing opportunities to make these conversations a reality and have full student buy-in. And that is such a good point, because having somebody from that particular career or job come in and speak to the students about their experiences is so much more powerful than, you know, teachers and whatnot just talking about the job in hypothetical. I know I haven't heard any of the, you know, devil's advocate, but, you know, we do know that there's going to be students that are going to choose those careers that maybe aren't a priority sector, or maybe they're not, you know, one of the high wage, high demand careers, but it is the right fit for the student. And that's okay. So, I mean, in giving this presentation, we're giving you these tools and these options that you can use with students. But, you know, we all know as educators and counselors that there will be actors, right? There's going to be professional YouTube stars, even if they're highly competitive careers. And we will still want to support those students' interests and skills and their passions. But it's really more about weighing out the interests of the student with their willingness to make sacrifices for having, you know, the lifestyle that they want. So labor market information can be really helpful and really powerful in that regard. Jen, you want to talk a little bit about the next thing?
Yeah, go ahead and we'll have you go to the next slide. So we wanted to really, again, our presentation is called Practical Applications. And so I always love presentations where we can give somebody some takeaways and give and go. And so what we've done is we've put together a couple of useful tools that you could use in the classroom as educators or as counselors in doing your career presentations that might be useful for students. So in the first slide, you'll see here, we put together a kind of I call it a one-pager, it's actually two, but it's really an overview of all the terms that we talked about today. You'll see the link in the top right-hand corner. And that link's going to take you to a Google folder where this kind of LMI overview document lives. And you can feel free to use this, pass this out to students when you're having those initial conversations around labor market, and that you want to have a reference material for them and for you. So that is available for you to use and take away. We've also put together two takeaways with 2 lesson plans. And these lesson plans focus on 2 areas. Basically walking through step by step with your students on researching labor market information, getting them familiar with the terms. And you can see that this lesson plan is specific to San Diego and the Imperial counties. One of the things that we've linked in these lesson plans is the resources the students could use to find the information in the lesson. I also put a link there for the sub-regional profiles in San Diego County. So on My Workforce Connection, under the labor market briefs or reports, we even kind of dive a little deeper into the sub-region. So if you're in Fallbrook up in the North County, you have access to labor market information that is specific to that area. So it's a really great tool for you as the educator or the counselor, and so also a really good tool for students as they're referencing career, where maybe they don't have plans to kind of move out of their area in which they live. So great resource there. And then the second one is emerging trends. So we kind of put out, I'm gonna have you go back real quick, Nicole.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay. The second one was lesson plan based on emerging trends around careers. We kind of bring some cross-curricular activities. We talk about the Great Recession and the COVID pandemic, and so a lot of cross-curricular efforts in that lesson plan. So please feel free to take these and share with your CTE teachers, counselors. It's all accessible to everybody. So with that said, I'll have you go to the next slide. Thank you, Nicole. We also wanted to highlight the back of the career education guide because we thought this is a powerful tool. These are all the LMI, we could have just linked these in a bullets for you, but we really wanted to tell you to go here because this resource in the back of the career education guide has brief summaries of what each of those resources are, and then links directly embedded on how to locate them. So please use that as a reference. Anything you want to share about that, Nicole and Christine?
Just now that we're living in the digital world of Google Classroom, it's nice to have this like linked digitally because they're all linked. So, you know, if you wanted to post this on a career education website for the district or the school, or if maybe you were just teaching this information and students needed access, I tend to be the person that forgets like which website was for which thing. So I like that they have these little blurbs that tell you, oh yeah, this is the one with the salary surfer, or this is the one where you can do an inventory. And they're all linked in the digital version, which is nice.
Thank you. And then today, kind of to wrap this up, today we linked at the end of our presentation, just all the links that we cited that are there for your reference. We also included a link to a presentation that was given by the Center of Excellence. It's a recording that you could use if you wanted to kind of take a deeper dive into Tina Nobartel's COE presentation. We wanted you to have access to that because it does get very technical, but it's a great resource if you're all gung-ho about LMI. And with that kind of concludes our presentation. I'm going to turn it over to Christine, who's going to talk about the survey, and then we'll kind of open it up for some questions if anybody has any.
Thanks. I just put the link to the survey in the chat. This is our first time doing a joint presentation for everybody, so any kind of feedback would be really helpful for us. So you can either do it through the presentation or through the link right here in the chat.
Yeah, and we'll open it up if anybody has questions or needs clarification with any of this stuff, because I know we threw a lot at you. Yeah, the slide deck, we should put that link. Can you put that PDF link in again? We put that in at the beginning, but we'll put it in again. The URL for the soft skills should be linked on that slide, but I'll go back to it. Also, I think it's this one, which somebody asked about. So this takes you where it says resources, I think.
No, it's under labor market information.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think it's under labor market briefs.
Reports. Yeah, so it's under reports, and they have, you can see all these specialty reports here. So they've got resilient jobs, employability skills, gig economy. They've got one specifically on sector accommodation brief for the health sector, patient care. So when you are in the presentation and you click that little link icon in the corner, it should take you to where you can find these directly. And then just as a reminder, the other place that has kind of everything in one-stop shop is this one right here. This kind of has all of it. I think this is slide 27. Yes, we're using California Career Zone in Carlsbad with our middle school students right now, and they are loving it. And they've just, this past year, completely redone the entire website. So it's much more user-friendly, and they can actually create like student portals, which is awesome.
And I just want to mention there was a question about data outside of San Diego Imperial County. So if you want to stick to the same sort of source of data about middle skill jobs that's tied to the community colleges, it is coeccc.net. And that is the overarching Centers of Excellence webpage. And then you can dive down into which region within California.
Yeah, she just put the link in the chat. Thank you, Christine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, then thank you for that, Joel and Christine, for mentioning that. The COE does a lot of work about LMI, but we really wanted to kind of have this specific to the San Diego Imperial County area. And so that's why you'll see a lot of those resources linked specifically to that.
Yep.
All right. If anybody doesn't have anything else, we will close it out. I just want to thank everybody for coming and taking your afternoon to learn more about LMI and how we can have these important conversations with students. We know how valuable they can be in providing direction to students. I always think I wish that somebody had these conversations with me when I was, a sophomore, junior, senior. And so I feel really passionate about this. So thank you.